Today we are going to check out the Adam Audio A5X, and the AX series might be Adam's most popular series because I keep seeing the speakers in this family being used in the studios of many people I watch on YouTube, so I was really curious to see how good they are. We are also going to compare them with the T5Vs, which are Adam's more affordable monitors, and these retail for around $400 or 40,000 Indian rupees, while the A5X retail for around $1,000 or 85,000 rupees. So we are going to find out whether it is worth spending more than twice as much on the A5X and which one of these you should go for if your budget is somewhere in the middle of their price point and you are confused between the two. Hey guys, I am Siddharth and this is going to be a long video, so feel free to use the timestamp navigation because you really don't want to miss how both of these speakers sound. In the box, you get a manual, a mono RCA stereo link cable that is actually very good in quality, then there is the power cable, and finally you get to the speakers. I really like how the A5Xs look. While I do appreciate the minimalist aesthetics of the T5Vs, the A5Xs also look stunning with their industrial design with all these screws and a completely metal waveguide for the tweeters. This is a front-ported speaker. So we have these oddly shaped holes in the A5Xs because of space constraints. The larger A7 and A8X have round holes which look nicer, but I also don't mind how the ports on the A5Xs look. And of course, the advantage of a front-ported speaker over a rear-ported speaker like the T5Vs is that you can put them closer to the wall without affecting their sound quality. The build of the A5Xs is really good. The front fascia seems to be made of a material that feels almost too good and dense to be plastic. It has a very matte and rough kind of texture to it, so it is the kind of a material that will continue looking like this for a very long time. These are actually more compact than the T5Vs, even though they are a heavier pair of speakers. The 5-inch woofer they have used is made up of a mix of carbon, Rohacell and glass. And it looks really amazing with its glossy finish on its carbon fiber texture, which sets a really nice contrast in their otherwise completely matte design. You can also apply different skins to them, so you can give them a white color or you can go crazy and go with a Tarzan theme. On front, they feature a power switch and a volume control which has a detent on the central 0 decibel position, so it is easy to set there quickly, and you also have the power LED and a stereo link LED which lights up when you use that. The T5Vs have all of these controls and LED at their back, and having volume and power controls on front may not seem like a big deal, but if you research, there aren't many professional monitors that have volume control on front, and it also allows you to quickly change the left and right channel balance because you can control the volume on each monitor individually on front. At back, you get inputs and outputs for the stereo link, which we will talk about soon, an unbalanced RCA input and a balanced XLR input. If you plug in both RCA and XLR, then the signal would just get mixed on the A5Xs and you will hear both audio sources. While the T5Vs have a switch that switches between their RCA and XLR inputs, so you will have to manually change that if you have two devices plugged in. Then, a very nice feature on the A5Xs are these knobs, which you can turn to control their frequency response in a very granular way up to +6 or -6 decibels. So you can turn one of these knobs to control the high frequency response from 5 kHz and then the knob on the right to control the low frequency response at 300 Hz. And then there is another knob for tweeter level, which can be confusing, but what it does is that it alters the overall level of the tweeter and frequency range instead of altering from 5 kHz band. With these controls, you can alter their sound to match the acoustic character of your room to make them sound more balanced, and if you just listen to them casually, you can increase or decrease the bass and treble response according to your liking. I personally set everything to 0 because in my room they sound very engaging even with their default setting. The T5Vs also feature high and low shelf adjustment up to 2 decibels instead of 6 decibels, but I think that this should be good enough for majority of users. The A5Xs also feature stereo link, which can be a very useful feature because it allows you to send both the left and right signal to one speaker, and then from that speaker you can send a single cable to the other speaker, and that allows you to control the volume for both of these speakers with just one master speaker. It only works with RCA and not XLR, so just keep that in mind. The A5Xs can also be wall mounted if you buy the additional wall mounts for these, and that can be really useful because it can free up a lot of space on your desk. One notable difference between the A5X and T5Vs is that while the T5Vs use Class D amplifiers for both their tweeter and woofers, on the A5X we have a Class D amplifier for the woofer and a Class AB amplifier for the tweeter. Amplifier comparison is a very complex topic, and one type of amplifier may not always be better than other type of amplifier, and the Class AB amplifier must have been chosen with the A5X because of its sound characteristics, but these amplifiers do get hot compared to the Class D amplifiers, so the T5Vs just stay a degree or two above the room temperature, while the A5Xs can go up to 45 degrees Celsius at their back. It shouldn't be a problem within their operating temperature of up to 40 degrees Celsius, but I do turn the A5Xs off when not using them, while with the T5Vs you can just keep them on 24/7 without needing to think about power consumption or heat. The A5X features Adam's XR tweeter, which is an air motion transformer tweeter that works in a very different way than a conventional dome tweeter. It has a much larger surface area and can push air 4 times faster than a dome tweeter. So Adam has different names for their tweeters in their lineup in different price ranges, and the UART, XART and SART are just names assigned to these tweeters. The UART tweeter on the T5Vs goes up to 25 kHz, but the XART tweeter goes up to 50 kHz. Now both of these limits are of course way beyond the human hearing range, but it does show how capable these tweeters are. I have talked about the sound characteristics of these tweeters in my T5V review, but it basically feels like the sound is coming from a source that is way bigger in size than the small tweeters. And it is a very powerful presentation in the highs that keeps up with the displacement of the woofer, and on the A5Xs there really is a significant upgrade on the tweeters over the T5Vs. So it sounds even more non-fatiguing while still being very detailed and retaining all the energy in the highs. These are studio monitors, which means that they deliver a flat sound signature. So these are meant for professional level work with sound, and if you are going to use these in your studio for mixing and mastering, they are going to work really well, and I will talk more about that soon. But a misconception I see in minds of people is that studio monitors sound boring because they are flat, but in my experience that has never been the case, especially with both of these models of Adam speakers, and the A5Xs are on a totally next level. We are going to talk about the technical aspects of their sonic performance, but simply speaking, the sound that I get from these speakers is what I was looking to get from speakers for a very long time. When I listen to the A5Xs, I do not feel like I need an improvement in any area of the presentation of their sound. The T5Vs are also really great, but they don't reach the perfection and magic that the A5Xs have. These really do have the potential for becoming the endgame speakers even for audiophiles, and endgame is not a word that I use lightly. The tweeter and the woofer on the A5Xs just integrate in such a perfect cohesion that it really makes it a little difficult to discuss high, mid and low frequencies separately. That is because as I try to describe their sound, I don't think about how good the highs or lows are specifically, but how amazing the overall experience is that I have with their sound. These speakers have an extremely realistic and detailed presentation of sound with a very three-dimensional quality to their soundstage. And it's not just the left and right stereo image that is great with these speakers, but it is the depth and width of soundstage and the precision of placement of the instruments in the 3D space that takes their sound on the next level. So in addition to doing this and this, they also do this and this amongst other things. The sweet spot for listening to these speakers is also surprisingly wide, so even when you are in very odd positions in front of these speakers, they still deliver that holographic listening experience. Now I have to mention that this depth that I am talking about was greatly increased by the RME EDI2 DAC FS that I used to test these speakers. I was using this $100 SMSL DAC earlier, and then I switched to this $1000 RME DAC, and it really improved the three-dimensional aspect of the sound that I am talking about. Better DACs will benefit all speakers, but this also shows how revealing these speakers are of your audio chain, because with a lower quality of speakers, you may not hear a big difference when switching DACs. You can also subscribe to the channel with bell icon so you don't miss my video on this DAC in which I will explain the very interesting features that it has. The highs on the A5Xs really surprised me with how detailed they are while still being natural and easy to listen to even when keeping their price tag in mind. These tweeters really reveal the details in a very effortless way, and even though I was expecting them to be easy on the ears, I didn't think that they would also retain the naturalness and realism along with the details, because that is actually not easy to achieve. The highs are of course also very well extended, which is what gives the instruments the completeness in their sound, and the high frequency extension in isolation is actually pretty close between the A5Xs and the T5Vs. Now even the T5Vs are very detailed and resolving speakers, but the A5Xs have micro details of instruments that makes them extremely realistic. I was listening to a track that had tabla in it, which is a kind of an Indian drum, and when you hit the top part of this instrument, it continues to create a very quiet sound after the initial hit as its membrane vibrates. And that micro detail is audible with these speakers, which is something that I have not been able to hear except when being physically present with this instrument during the time that I studied Indian classical music. So just as soon as I got the A5Xs, I called my friend Vaibhav and told him that he had to have a listen to these speakers now. And then when he arrived, we played one of the tracks in Naruto Shippuden OST. The Japanese violin in that track sounded so realistic and moving that I had to stop the playback because both of us were about to tear up. And even though it is completely fine for men to cry, we personally try to avoid that in front of our friends. What Vaibhav said about his experience with these speakers was that it felt like the sound was directly going into his brain, which is something that I can see someone feeling because they really do an amazing job of disappearing from front of you as sound sources, and you really hear the sound from that three-dimensional space that I talked about. The T5Vs also have this quality of disappearing from front of you, which many good speakers do, but the A5Xs do that in a very noticeably better way, and the three-dimensional sound source is much larger with the A5X. The mids on these are also extremely natural and the vocals sound really lifelike. And both male and female vocals sound equally excellent on these because of how good the bass and treble is. Because these are so resolving, you also hear a good separation between voices when multiple singers are there, and it is a cliche in audio gear reviews to say that it feels like the singer is singing in front of you, but once you close your eyes while sitting in front of these speakers, it is difficult to not have the feeling of being physically present with the singers. And finally, coming to the bass, this carbon fiber woofer with these exotic materials doesn't only look good, but it also performs extremely well. The bass on these is very tight and very well controlled. Generally, with very revealing and natural sounding audio gear, I lean more towards naturally recorded music with natural instruments and unprocessed vocals, but another pleasantly surprising quality about the A5Xs is how good electronic music sounds with these. I didn't personally feel the need of a subwoofer with these for my listening purposes, but if you work with music that has important information in the low end, you can buy one of the matching subwoofers that Adam sells. And if you are going to add a subwoofer to these speakers, then I would highly recommend that you buy a very high quality subwoofer and don't cheap out, because if you get something that can't match the control and tightness of the bass on the woofer on these speakers, it could really worsen the sound instead of improving it. You can also go with the bigger A7X or A8X if you need a low end that extends lower than the 50Hz limit on these speakers, which is actually 5Hz higher than the T5Vs, but in practice I didn't feel that one of these speakers extended lower than the other. So with their excellent performance across the frequency range, the A5Xs really handle every genre of music equally well, and all kinds of instruments sound really amazing on these. So strings in orchestral music, acoustic and electric guitars, drums of all kinds sound hyper realistic. Now in comparison to the T5Vs, I would just start by saying that the T5Vs sound really excellent. So just because the A5Xs are better doesn't mean that they are not good. But when you put them side by side with the A5X, you do notice differences. So the Adam A5Xs have bass that I feel is much tighter. Now I am not in a room that is properly acoustically treated, and I do position my speakers kind of close to the wall, So I think that the A5Xs may have been getting an advantage because of their front ported design, but I think that even in a well treated room with better positioning of speakers, the A5Xs would have tighter sounding and more resolving bass than the T5Vs. The woofer on the A5Xs just perfectly matches the sonic excellence of their tweeter, while with the T5Vs, I felt that the tweeters were the star of the show, with the woofers being good but not as special as the tweeters. And coming to the tweeter, the A5Xs also have a significantly improved driver over the T5Vs. While the tweeter on the T5Vs is also very detailed and revealing of the audio, the XR tweeter just performs on another level, as I said, and the presentation of their sound is more natural and the imaging of the instruments is also more precise with a greater depth and width and three-dimensionality. So if you have up to a $400 or $600 budget and you can't extend it, then I would easily recommend the T5Vs. You are getting speakers that are really great for everyday use and for working with sound too. The T5Vs sound really great, and I just didn't talk about them as much because this is an A5X review. But then if you have reached up to a $700 budget and you can save up and manage the $1000 price tag of the A5Xs, then I would absolutely recommend that you get the A5Xs. And the reason for that is that with audio gear, there is a law of diminishing returns. So unlike their price tag, I can't exactly say that the A5Xs sound more than twice as good as the T5Vs, but I don't think that we can quantify audio quality in percentages like that. But considering how the sound quality with audio gear scales up with price, the A5Xs scale up extremely well on that curve, and the improvement in sound quality is absolutely worth the increase in price. Even if you leave out features like volume control on front, the more granular sound control knobs at back, wall mountable design and stereo link, the greater immersiveness, micro details and imaging just pushes the sound of the A5Xs to become extremely natural and lifelike, and that jump in the realism is something that I feel is totally worth it. Even though the T5Vs have become well known for the value for money they offer, I can't say that the A5Xs also don't offer an equally good value for money even at their higher price point. If you are working with sound professionally, the T5Vs will also allow you to hear what is going on in your mix in great details, but if you are a person who has to work a lot with lower frequencies, I do think that the more resolving woofer of the A5Xs will really help. So in conclusion, I really thought that this review would focus more towards how good the A5Xs are technically and how the audio professionals will be able to create great mixes with a balanced sound. But I really didn't expect that the experience with the A5Xs would be so moving that I would just keep going on from one track to another to hear how good it sounds. They are distractingly good, and they are obviously great for gaming and movies too. So if you are able to afford the A5Xs for casual listening, I really can't recommend them enough, and all the professionals that I have seen using these and the other models in the AX series must also be having a really great time while working in their studios. And that was finally it for today. I'll have links to buy all of these stuff featured in the video description along with the A5Xs. You can also check out my Adam T5V review and the review for the Isoacoustics stands. Do let me know your thoughts about this video in the comment section below, and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it or a thumbs down if you disliked it. Subscribe with bell because the RME DAC is also a very exciting product. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.